Alrighty, so today we're going to look at Minnesota United in the Moving Forward series episode, and there's no doubt that this is one of the more anticipated episode in the Moving Forward series this season because this is definitely one of the teams that I dearly support. And I'm also going to straight down say this, out of all the teams I've watched in the league for the past couple of years and ever since I started covering MLS extensively on the channel, the Loons have been one of the most frustrating teams to watch for the past couple of seasons. And this is not just because I dearly support this team. It's mainly because they have so much potential to do much better than what we've seen in the past couple of seasons. And that I feel like this year was almost the same as last year. There's so much potential that this could be an MLS Cup contender. But yet, a lot of guys either underperform or Adrian Heave decided to mailing with tactics. That is the reason why the Heave out crowd gets louder and louder at every single losses, especially during that collapse that they had in the latter part of the season, or the fact that there just never seems to be some consistency with this team. I mean, it's either the attack is not scoring goals and this team struggle, or the fact that we saw what happened in the latter part of the season where the defense just completely crater and looked like a defense from what I've seen in the first 2 years of their existence in MLS, just shipping goals for fun. But nevertheless, they did finish with a 14-6-14 record with 48 points. They scored 48 goals this season, but give up 51 goals, which is definitely, I think, the third most goals that they have given up in a season. Besides, we know what happened in the first two seasons when they were shipping off 70 goals in the first two seasons. We definitely won't talk about too much about how those seasons went, because those seasons where it was pretty much just Minnesota fielding an NASL team until they realized that, yeah, that's of course is not going to work out. And then they had a goal differential of -3. Now the good news is they made the playoffs again, and in fact I think this is the 4th straight year that the team have made it to the playoffs. And even going back to 2019, this is one of the only teams that have made it to the playoff consistently since 2019. But unfortunately, this team, besides that one magical Western Conference final run that they had in the COVID year, which we'll not talk about how that of course ended, because I don't want to bring up that memory that I remember from the Western Conference final against the Seattle Sounders. They got eliminated by FC Dallas in the first round. Now, I will kind of sugarcoat a little bit. I will say that this year's elimination isn't as painful and isn't as frustrated as I was last year. Well, actually, I wouldn't say painful. It was still painful to see this team lose in a PK shootout, and I can understand why some Loons fans will say that this year feels even more painful than last year, because, they had a chance to win the game, and it was a winnable game, and they just couldn't quite pull out. But at the end of the day, my view of PK shootout, it's pretty much a crapshoot. It's like a flip a coin, and unfortunately, the Loons was on the wrong end of that coin, which is kind of just sums up in terms of the sports culture of Minnesota. They always are the bridesmaid and end up on the wrong shoot of the coin. But at least this year, in terms of elimination, I do feel a little bit more proud of how the team performed, because, last year when they played against the Timbers in the first round, they did not show up. Like, that was probably the most flat performance I've seen from a playoff team in the previous season, and that at least this year they definitely put up a big fight against FC Dallas, and that, again, unfortunately, they just came up short in the PK shootout and got eliminated once again in the first round. Now, the top goal scored for this Minnesota United team, I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise to see Emmanuel Reynoso as the top goal scorer. Although, I will say that it should be a bit surprised, because in many ways, the guy that is second on the top goal scorer sheet should be the top goal scorer in Luis Amarilla. And for a while, it was that case. I mean, especially when Amarilla had that one good run during the summer month. Yeah, it looked like he was going to be a guy that scored 10+ goals, but he definitely cooled off in September to a rate where he started to become like the Luis Amarilla that we saw in the beginning of the season, where we just wondered why in the world do we actually decide to give this guy a second stint. And then we got Franco Fragapane, who had a really disappointed start to the season, finished with 7 goals, followed by Robin Lod with 6 goals, and Bongi, who won. He finished on the top 5 with 2 goals, along with a lot of players that have 2 goals for this Minnesota United team. Top assist leader, this should be a no surprise, Emmanuel Reynoso with 11 assists this season, followed by Luis Amarilla with 5 assists, Bongi Huane with 4 assists, Franco Fragapane with 3 assists, and DJ Taylor rounds up the top 5 with 3 assists. Now, what are some of the highlights for this Minnesota United team? It was another incredible season for Reynoso, and again, this is the thing about this Loons team. If Reynoso is performing well, this team perform well. If Reynoso is not performing well, then yeah, this team is going to suck a lot. And you know, throughout the season, you know, that not only is the case, but that's just been the case for the past couple years, and that's where I do have some concern, because you know, I know in this league you want to of course build in upon your number 10s, and that, you know, I mentioned before, the number 10 position has really becoming the most essential position in this league, and you can definitely do some good thing if you can find a number 10, and I'm blessed the fact that Minnesota United is able to have one of the best number 10 in Emmanuel Reynoso, but at times I just feel like we're way too rely on him, and that this is kind of similar to what I saw with Nashville SC with Hani Mukhtar, where, you know, Nashville absolutely just kind of live and die with Hani Mukhtar, and we saw how that of course went for Nashville in the playoffs, where they also suffer a first round exit. So I feel like, you know, the notion of the fact that, you know, it's essential that you can have a number 10 in your team is still going to be important, but I think maybe there are some teams that are started to think that they should only rely on their number 10 so that they can of course win games, when in reality I don't think that's enough. I think you need to build upon your number 10. You still need to have a good striker and good wingers, and that's just not the case for this Loons team, or for teams that are just heavily rely on their number 10. Now, the other highlights is that Dane Sinclair continued to becoming a bona fide top 5 goalkeeper in the league. So in the early part of the season, we saw Dane Sinclair once again step up for Tyler Miller after he of course got injured, and he started to show why he was considered one of the top rated young goalkeeper in the league, making some good saves so far. Now obviously there was a stretch during August where he basically just fall off a cliff. Like there was a time where his confidence was at its lowest, and that I feel like that MLS All-Star game in Minnesota, that probably was a big blessing, the fact that Dane Sinclair got a chance in that, because I think after that game where he put on an incredible performance and winning the MVP award, it definitely boosted his confidence, where he was back to his great form that he's been throughout the season. I mean, I will say that the number doesn't speak itself, because, you know, when you look at the clean sheet that Dane Sinclair has, it's not as much as what we seen with other goalkeeper. But when you actually watch him day in and day out, as I have watched him, I can say that he is definitely considered to be a guy that could be a bona fide top 5 goalkeeper. And you got to also remember, he's still a relatively young goalkeeper, and you know, young goalkeepers are going to eventually have those kind of form where they kind of dip a little bit. But I think what's also important to see about Dane Sinclair is the fact that when he does have those kind of run of form where he was not performing at its best, but he didn't absolutely drop the floor and just didn't crater, just to show you that, yeah, this kid has some mental toughness, and that he can definitely be considered to be a top 5 goalkeeper. Because, you know, like outfield player, goalkeepers are going to have bad run of form, but it's all about how you of course overcome it. And especially for young goalkeeper, that is one of the toughest and probably the toughest thing to trying to overcome. And like I said, for Dane Sinclair, the fact that he was able to overcome that just to shows you that he is definitely a guy that could be a stud, and could be even a future Canadian men's national team goalkeeper. I mean, I know most likely once Bojan is going to move on, which I think is going to be the case, it seems like Maxime Crépeau is going to be the next in line, but don't count out Dane Sinclair too. I mean, if Dane Sinclair continue to put on a good performance, yeah, the Canadian national team, all of a sudden they might have a discussion of, are they going to go with Crépeau or Dane Sinclair as their future goalkeeper for the team. And also not be surprised the fact that Dane Sinclair could be sold off pretty soon, because, you know, his stock is definitely rising, and I know there's going to be a lot of European team that is looking at his performance, and eventually I think Minnesota is going to sell him for a big profit in the future. And then of course the historic run that they had from late June to late August. I mean, I definitely had a great time during that run where it was kind of surreal. The fact that the team was winning, the team was performing and hitting on all cylinder. They were definitely one of the hottest team during the summer month, and that obviously eventually that did kind of came to an end in late August. And who would know that it kind of came to an end at the game that I've attended in late August against Real Salt Lake, and also a game where Adrian Heath decided to be stubborn again and decided to not play his starters and gamble the fact that he can get free points at home in the very next week, which it did not go so well in that game against FC Dallas. But besides that, it was just fun to see how the team was performing at all cylinders, and that again I was hoping that it can continue as we get into the latter part of the season, and that this is also where it's perfectly transitioned into talking about the lowlights. And the old saying that yes, you want to play at the best throughout a season, but you also got to be careful not to peak too soon. And I think this team definitely is an example and fall victim to maybe peaking too soon, because September and October, they basically went on a historic bad run in the franchise history, even compared to the first two years of this team, where again I even say they kind of remember that they're a Minnesota team, and that the thing about Minnesota teams is that they're not supposed to have fun and not supposed to go on a great run as the playoffs begin. There's always going to be some disappointment, and the disappointment came in the last month of the season, where they went from being in third place in the Western Conference and looked like secure to be having a home field advantage, to just absolutely crater and collapse on like a 6-game winless run, and that they just sneak into the playoffs on the final day of the season against the Vancouver Whitecaps. And I also would like to say that they probably wouldn't have made it to the playoffs, not just because they if they didn't win the last game of the season, but just in general, because of the fact that other teams around them was also having a historic bad September. In some way, they kind of got lucky, the fact that they were able to make it to the playoffs. But make no mistake, I mean, that September was just, it was just historically bad in a way where it really kind of started with Bakaye Debasi being injured for this team. And, usually when you lose a key player, it definitely does hurt. But the rate that I saw him kind of gone down, and that this team just completely crumbled, especially on the defensive end, there's definitely some big alarm that has to be sound. And it also maybe just kind of bubbled kind of something that's been under the surface for a very long time that a lot of Loons fans have not looked into, and that is defensive depth. This team does not have a lot of defensive depth, and that it was fully exposed in the final month of the season. Once their star center back went down, they don't have anybody else to cover. I mean, Brent Coleman, one of the more polarized kind of character in the Loons fan base, stepped into that role. And as much as there might be some that were hoping he's going to be a good replacement, no, he's not. He looked like he is way past his prime, and there's a reason why we ditched him a long time ago. Like I said, there's zero depth at the back. I mentioned a lot about that in just a second ago. And then, of course, on the wrong end of a major U.S. Open Cup upset against Union Omaha. I mean, I know we'll definitely talk about what happened in the season, but let's also not forget what happened in the U.S. Open Cup, and how, I will say that out of the most painful losses that I've seen this team have suffered, and I have seen a lot of painful losses, I'm going to say that one is probably be number one in terms of the most painful upset. Maybe even more painful than the one against the Seattle Sounders in the Western Conference Final. Yeah, sure. That game, yes, they collapsed in the last 15 minutes to miss out on MLS Cup. But in this game, they were playing at home against a third tier team. And I know last year in the U.S. Open Cup, there's been some big upset in so forth. But the fact that they play at home and just didn't have any respect to Union Omaha, and after Union Omaha has shown that they can beat against MLS team, I think that is going to go down as probably the most embarrassing loss in franchise history. Like, there's just no excuse. The fact that this team weren't unable to beat them, and say all you want about all the great upsets and stuff like that. When you're on the wrong end of it, it will definitely sting more, and that you will definitely look back at that game as a way where it's definitely a game that we will not forget, but not for a good reason. And also, again, it's going to be similar to what I said about the Seattle Sounders game in the Western Conference Finals. A game I don't kind of want to talk about down the line, but unfortunately, I have to kind of talk about it because it's something that does happen, and it just again, that game was just it was really heartbreaking. And and the funny thing is, I was about to go to watch the Republic and the Quakes, and the fact that I was kind of surprised I was able to still be excited for that Sports Hop series episode. It is kind of a miracle because of what I saw. I was pretty devastated when I saw them losing to a third tier team, even if this is a team that has already been creating some big upsets, as we have seen Union Omaha has done in their historic run in the US Open Cup. Now, in terms of the MVP and revelation, I mean, I would say that it's a no-brainer to put Emmanuel Reynoso, but I would definitely give a good shout out to Dane Sinclair. I mean, I think there's at times where Dane Sinclair was actually more of the MVP and more of the heart and soul of this team compared to Emmanuel Reynoso, especially at the beginning of the season. Like, when Dane Sinclair was at the peak of his power last season in the beginning of the year, he was the guy that is single-handedly just kind of giving this team a chance, and that this team could have given up a ton more goals in the beginning of the season of how bad the defense also was. But in the end, got to go with Reynoso because, like I said, this team is completely centered toward Reynoso, and it all depends on if he does well. If he does well, then this team, of course, would win. If he doesn't do well, then yeah, this team would absolutely crater. Now, in terms of some disappointment, I mean, I could have easily gone with Luis Amarilla or even Franco Frapponi because of their underwhelming year. But still, I feel like for both of those guys, even though, yes, it was an underwhelming year and they kind of underachieved, they at least had some part of the season where they had a good run. I mean, Amarilla had a really hot streak going in the summer. Same goes with Franco Frapponi. I cannot say that about Abu Denladi. And I knew it when they decided to sign him last season that this was a terrible move, and that this is just a move that just kind of explained why this team didn't really get competitive until the third season, and just part of just a move that gets off to this so-called Adrian Heath 3-year plan off to a bad start when they drafted him number 1. I mean, you talk about some of the worst number 1 picks of all time. I think Abu Denladi is definitely going to go down as the worst number 1 pick and the all-time bust in terms of the super draft, because while he definitely had some potential when he came into the league with the team, and that he did some good things for the Loons in the first season, yeah, he just never able to replicate what he did, and that he just pretty much just went downhill ever since that, to a point where this season it just pretty much sums it up. Like, when he was playing on the pitch, you can see a guy that not only have no confidence whatsoever, but was just lazy, just decided not to run, not to make the runs as a number 9 does, and a guy that just single-handedly are probably one of the most hated players in this fan base. And it's just getting to a point where even like if you even disappoint Adrian Heath to a point where you are just stuck on the bench, yeah, you of course did something badly, because for a while Abu Denladi is definitely one of the player that Adrian Heath still tends to like to play, even though he does not offer anything to this attack. And that, yeah, I mean, I think this offseason we have finally cut ties with him, and I think that's pretty much for good. The fact that I don't expect him to return back to this team. Like, I never like it, the fact that he returned to this team for the second stint, and it's been proven pretty much throughout last season of how bad he was. Now, in terms of moving forward, they're currently linked with 2 South Korean international striker in Kwon Woo-jo and Cho Gwin-song. Now, obviously, the Cho Gwin-song is the one that a lot of people are paying attention to, because not only the fact that he has been getting interest from Minnesota, but he's also been getting interest in terms of European club, and this is definitely going to be a fight for the Loons to able to get his signature, because anytime when you have interest in Europe and compared to MLS, we have seen most of the time players would rather go to Europe than MLS, and it makes sense, because Europe is where the well-known player are, and we have seen that in this league, this is basically a platform to of course develop players and eventually sell them off to Europe. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if the Loons can sign him. And I'll also mention a little bit later in the News of the Week episode, the Loons definitely create a very interesting clause to try and alert him to MLS. But in terms of the other striker in Kwon Woo-jo, now this is a guy that I have heard about, that the Loons has been rumored all the way back in September, and that rumor kind of died out a little bit as the season goes along, but all of a sudden it seems like it's back. And I know people are thinking, why is this team needs to find a number 9 when they already have a number 9 in Luis Amarilla? Well, I think maybe the reason this is the case is maybe this put a little bit more pressure on Luis Amarilla to perform, because, you know, Amarilla, you know, like it or not, he's probably still going to be there next season, and he's still going to be a guy that I think this team is going to hopefully rely on, the fact that he is finally that number 9 that this team can find to replace Christian Ramirez. I mean, it is mind-boggling the fact that this team still have not replaced the productivity that Christian Ramirez left this team back in 2018. But, you know, now that they're trying to add a little bit more players in terms of finally solving that solution, we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. Now, besides signing attackers, they absolutely need to sign more defenders. And I'm putting absolutely in all caps, because the fact that they only signed Danielle Henry this offseason, and the fact that they haven't really looked into that department, is very alarming. And it's, again, it's when you look at what undone them last season, it's not because of the goal scoring that undone them. Yes, the attack was bad as we head into the final stretch of the season, but the defense was even worse with the way that they were shipping goals for fun. And that, again, you know, while they definitely have two good pieces in defense in Debasi and Boxo, those guys are approaching their mid-30s. And I've said this before with this team, where they need to think about finding replacement soon, because those guys are going to drop off. And you definitely saw the drop off in Michael Boxhall too, where, you know, father time is definitely starting to kind of catch up to him. And the fact that they have not really look into that department is definitely very alarming. And I'm hoping that that's gonna change. If this team want to be competitive and still consider themselves an MLS Cup contender, they need defenders, because we've seen before where if you want to be an MLS Cup contender, you can have all the attack all you want, but as long as you don't have a good defense, and especially a good central midfield, you're not gonna be competing for MLS Cup. Or you're not even going to go deep into the playoffs, let alone competing for MLS Cup. And then finally, the last thing moving forward for this team, they need to give young guys a chance, but obviously that's not going to happen, because this team does not believe in the academy, and that Adrian Heath just refused to play young guys like it's a plague or something like that. But just for me, I hope eventually that's gonna change, because, again, you know, this team, they haven't really given a lot of young guys a chance to shine, and there's definitely some good talent that come out of the academy. I mean, a certain guy called Caden Clark kind of landed from the academy that could have been one of the players that would be influential for this Loons team going forward on the attack. And yeah, he of course moved on to the Red Bulls because of the fact that the Loons are not giving a chance. And I'm just have a feeling this is going to be the case for other players, that, you know, they're sick of getting stuck on the bench, and that the head coach is not giving them the chance. They want to move on from somewhere else, and when they do move on from somewhere else, and they of course turns out to do well, that just speaks a lot in terms of this team, in terms of believing the academy. They don't believe in the academy whatsoever, and it's sad, because you know, we have seen some teams that have been able to be successful when they do believe in the academy. And especially also when you look at some of the signings that this team has made throughout the past couple of seasons that hasn't worked out. Yeah, I think the fact that they still are in this system where they're going to rely heavily on some of the transfer that they have, but we're going to completely ignore the academy. It's just sad to see. But there you have it. That is pretty much it in terms of the Moving Forward series episode of Minnesota United. Again, this is probably the longest one I've done, because I want to go very in-depth in terms of talking about one of the teams that I dearly support in this league. But if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below, and make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe. And also, if you're a Minnesota United fan like myself, what do you think was the highlights, the lowlights, the MVP revelation, the disappointment, and moving forward, how is this team going to look for this upcoming season? But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.